Hello, my talk today is reliant upon a very simple premise, and the premise is this. The private sector, or the business world, is dependent on education, and education is dependent on teachers, which means teachers have all of the leverage. I'd like to look at this in a little bit different way, and I'd like to say, let's pretend that education had a CEO. Let's pretend education became a business in and of itself. What would education look like? The first order of business is identifying who education serves. Off the top of my head, let's look at the testing industry. It's estimated that the testing industry, like the SAT, the ACT, GREs, etc., is approximately a $20 billion a year industry. So naturally, the CEO of education would say, what is the testing industry paying education in order to profit $20 billion a year? Immediately, the CEO would realize that these testing industries aren't paying education anything. Perhaps there are people in education that are getting a couple of bucks in their pocket, and perhaps a couple of politicians are too, but for the most part, education is not being paid for their services. The CEO would then realize that the testing industry is in fact highly dependent on education. In fact, if it weren't for education, they wouldn't even be in business. So the CEO understands that immediately the business of education has all the leverage. The first thing to do is withdraw all the business that education offers the testing industry. At this point then, the testing industry plummets. Then the CEO for education buys the testing industry, all of its materials, for a discounted price, and now owns the rights to all of it. The CEO would continue to systematically look at the industries that are directly benefiting from education and do the exact same thing. Now, in a relatively short period of time, education would have a multi-billion-dollar revenue stream that could go to improving schools or increasing teacher salaries. And what's important to keep in mind, this isn't a brilliant suggestion. This is just how businesses function, and this is how businesses think. What I'm essentially suggesting is if the market wants to control education, or if the market wants to influence education, we as educators have one of two choices. Either play by market rules, or stand up and play by education rules. I personally believe that playing by education rules is what needs to happen. In the meantime, I suggest we do this. Now, education does not have a CEO and cannot have a CEO. So how can we actually make a change? Well, here's how to do it. Some say that education is a circus. And without the animals, there is no show. Which means then, teachers, you are the animals. Without you, there is no show. You really need to understand this. Without you, there is no show. Businesses depend on education. Education depends on teachers, which means businesses depend on teachers. What I'm going to get at is businesses should be paying teacher salaries. A great friend of mine once told me that teachers are overpaid. After asking why he thought that, he simply said, because their effectiveness can't be measured. Using that line of thinking, I agreed with him. Along a different line of thinking, also, if teachers are the fundamental pieces to education, and if the state of education is a circus, then teachers are, in fact, overpaid. That said, I do think good teachers are underpaid, and I think bad teachers, no matter how much they get paid, are overpaid. But how are the good and bad teachers distinguished? Well, this is exactly my friend's point. There's no way to quantify the quality of teachers. That said, and I've already mentioned this, the desire to measure teacher effectiveness is a typical market-based philosophy. It's dependent on quantifiable evidence, and it's short-sighted. So first of all, we all know teachers can't be quantifiably measured. As much as we try to pretend that they can't. That is market-based thinking. So let's hypothetically take teachers away from society, and teachers, you can take yourself away. But, hypothetically speaking, society now no longer has teachers. Now employers have to run their businesses. They also have to educate their employees. While many businesses have training programs to teach their employees the technical aspects of the job, in no way are they equipped to teach their employees from a young age to stay seated, to do what they're told, and to think only within the parameters allotted by an authoritative figure. So, the businesses would have to hire teachers who would really have no direct impact on their bottom line. Thus, the argument over teacher value begins anew. Teachers, then, are essential, and that is the measurement of their value. Though their effectiveness can't be quantifiably measured, if they're taken away, everybody loses. So why don't teachers know this? Well, I believe, and it's only a belief, that they've been bullied. They've been bullied to the point where they don't even know that they have value to leverage, and they don't even know that they how to leverage their value. They ask for livable wages. Seriously? People who serve an essential function have to ask for livable wages? When I was in sales, I learned that a good salesperson doesn't sell products, they sell value. Teachers don't yet understand this dance. In fairness, most salespeople don't either, hence the truism that 90% of the money is earned by 10% of the salespeople. What teachers do need to know is this. No matter the quality of education that they produce, the market value of education in itself is beyond their current comprehension. What's the value? Well, education has seemingly been a mess for a long time. Why? Perhaps it's because there are people and businesses profiting from it being that way. The standardized testing industry, for example, like the SAT, ACT, GRE, etc., things that I've already mentioned, are estimated to make $20 billion a year. Without education, these testing companies cease to exist. In business, if Company A is dependent on Company B, then Company B has all the leverage. From this standpoint, then, most businesses are dependent on education, and the entire testing industry is dependent on education. Thus, the value of teachers is quantifiable from this metric alone. In other words, teachers, you have the upper hand. You have the leverage you need. You have all the power. Put another way, if people and businesses are profiting from the state of education, teachers are doing their jobs very, very well. Maybe it's time the private sector start paying teachers who keep them in business. It's a simple solution, higher salaries immediately. But here's the secret to it all. The people profiting and the businesses profiting from the circus they call education already know what I'm saying. The reason then that teachers are underpaid is because they're being bullied. They've been bullied for so long that they think fighting for a small raise is the right thing to do. Teachers, as a result of being bullied, you don't actually understand what you're worth, and you don't actually understand the leverage that you have. In other words, teachers, you are the circus animals. Without you, there is no show. A livable wage? How about a wage that both acknowledges your role within the circus and a wage that keeps your dignity intact? Teachers, you don't need a CEO. All you need to do is know your value and know how to leverage it. Thank you.